in the new decade, data or AI, MarTech are everything. In the next 5 to 10 years, this is going to be the kind of new normal, but everyone will be doing it, right? So, and they would have access to much the same level of data and technology. So understanding the why behind the data and being able to go, beyond the data-driven conclusions by really applying, the kind of uniquely human skills of connecting, showing really true curiosity and applying some complex thinking I think is going to become more important.
This is HelloMasters, a podcast that dives into the fast-moving Dutch marketing world. Your host, Louise Doorn, founder of marketing platform HelloMasters, talks with movers and shakers at fast-growing startups and innovative businesses in the Netherlands. The key question we discuss: how to thrive in a time of relentless change.
Hello, today we have another HelloMasters, and today we're talking to a real marketing master. His name is Gregory. He comes from Croatia, but he's been in the Netherlands for a very long time, working with large brands in leading marketing organizations for over 20 years. He started in the marketing department at Sony in Paris, but then he called Amsterdam home for over 14 years. Then with Spill Games, I hope you still remember that company that was growing very rapidly about 10 years, 15 years ago. Then Greg headed up global media and digital marketing at Heineken International for a few years before he joined Booking.com to lead precision marketing, which, as I think you can imagine, there's a lot of precision in that huge data set that Booking comes to bear. So he had big jobs in, global platforms, global companies to really fine-tune marketing. And this year, Greg joined as the Chief Marketing Officer at Marktplaats. And Marktplaats is, of course, as we all Dutchies know, the iconic marketplace from the 90s that is still going strong. So we're super proud that Greg, could free up his busy calendar. He's actually today in Madrid to share his learnings across marketing roles at iconic brands that he's had the pleasure to work with for the last 20 years. So big welcome to you, Greg. How has your day been?
Great. Very happy to be here today. Thanks very much for welcoming, Louise. Looking forward for the conversation.
Yeah, awesome. So can you share a little bit about Marktplaats? As in my introduction, I think it started in 1999, right? And I think today, 1 out of 2 Dutch are visiting Marktplaats every single month. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we've got approximately 8 million monthly active visitors today on Marktplaats.
Wow.
So I think it positions Marktplaats, if I'm correct, in the Netherlands as the number 1 platform after basically Google's and Facebook portfolio. So quite a big achievement for what is really right now a household brand in the Dutch market.
Yeah, for sure. So can you tell a little bit about the role of the kind of almost enabling the circular economy? It's a big theme in the Netherlands, to buy less and reuse products a little bit more, which of course comes to the front and center of Marktplaats. So can you share a little bit about, that core component of your platform?
Yeah. Well, look, the industry in the Netherlands in general, if you look at the classifieds business, I think it's a business which is expected to continue to grow very significantly in the coming years. I think it's been even said that it would double in size in the coming 5 years. And what you see is that from a consumer point of view, I think what we witness is really a major consumption upgrade, around these notions of, buying more thoughtfully, sparingly, actually, and sustainably as well. So I think, the notion of reusing more, owning less, wasting less is something which is very topical these days. And Marktplaats sit really at the epicenter of this trend. I was reading a few articles when I onboarded at Marktplaats that consumers, economists, but also brands alike are all acknowledging the fact that the current one-way linear pattern of production and consumption, where products are made, consumed, is simply unsustainable. So for us, it's really a huge opportunity to be in this business. The second-hand trading at Marktplaats that facilitates reduces the amount of product that end up in incinerators normally, and reduces the demand for new products, resulting in lower costs for consumers, but also lower demand for resources and CO2 emissions. So as a marketeer, it's great to work in a business that is really doing good for, to people, but also to society.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So in the introduction, I shared a little bit about your bio, your background, 20 years going strong as a marketer, very impressive background. So share a little bit, Greg, why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do? Well, first of all, there's something I want to correct, because you said that I was Croatian, but I'm not Croatian. Actually, I was born and raised in Paris from foreign parents. So my parents immigrated in France in the 60s. My mom is German, and my dad was born in Croatia. So I grew up in a real multicultural environment, and I think it developed a very, very strong passion for languages and cultures and people in general. Mm-hmm. And I always tend to say that, the role of marketing is always to fulfill two key objectives. Obviously, driving growth for an organization is, I would say, objective number one. If marketing cannot prove its value or additive value even with an organization, then there is something that, marketeers would be doing probably not good enough. But also influencing behavioral change or mindset change. This is what, is the key goal also of marketeers. And it's something that I've been always, very, very passionate about. I started my career a long time ago, actually, at Sony, and worked 11 years in different functions in marketing, but also sales functions. And I was so lucky to work in different locations in Paris, in Amsterdam, in London, and Brussels, and have been always very, very fascinated about the impact that marketeers can do on people's lives in general, and how we can influence potentially and get the dividends of these change that we can influence. That's something I'm quite passionate about.
Yeah, well, it's also, I think, really interesting that you had the opportunity to combine sales and marketing into your career. That's often, when I talk to CMOs, I did 2 podcasts last week, and also their kind of the conversions, particularly with fast-growing companies. It's so important to bring that all together. And but it wasn't, set out to be in the beginning of our careers. It was very much, maybe sometimes even a little bit of a battle internally between these two departments. So what is kind of your key learning about having the exposure to both sales and marketing, and how does it come to fruition in your role today by combining these two elements into your role?
Yeah, so for me, it was really almost like a mandatory part of the kind of marketing schools I come from. But I really enjoyed thoroughly my experience as a sales guy. I started my career 3 years in marketing, and then I had the chance to become a key account manager, and I was running accounts in France like Carrefour or La Fnac, multiple type of chain. And I was, this is probably the period where I generated the biggest learnings to be on the other side and really, tracking the deals and, understanding, the key levers of performance on the distributor side or retail side. It brings a level of humility that many marketeers should have before thinking that they have, all the knowledge at hand or all the munitions in hand in order to do their job effectively. And I think having the double experience is something which is fundamental today. Every marketeer should definitely, have a sales experience, in my opinion. Vice versa, I think, I've encountered people who came from a sales background and evolved and turned into becoming amazing marketeers as well. So it's not just one way. I think it's definitely 2 ways. Yeah. What I would add also is that, I come from, a pretty traditional brand building background. And I think having evolved during, almost 4 years at Booking in a more, performance-based marketing mindset has also added, another, discipline in my curricula, which I really value a lot, because there are tremendous differences actually between, the more FMCG, CPG background that I experienced at Heineken, for example, at Sony, versus what I've discovered when I joined Booking and more recently Marktplaats.
Yeah. And would you say that, most bigger CMO roles, I see, and if I talk to, our colleagues in the industry, they kind of tend to be more in the like e-commerce, direct to consumer kind of brand building spaces, like bol.com, like Marktplaats. I talked to the chief marketing officer, who's also the chief commercial officer at Virtua Gym, which is a very big platform. And they all tend to have kind of that same philosophy. Whereas if you kind of talk to marketers at, larger corporate organizations, they tend to be kind of still be a little bit more delineated between certain areas in marketing. What are kind of for you the key differences between those different type of companies? It's not even like they're all big companies. It's more around kind of, is it direct to consumer? Is it more like brand building? Is it a more complex selling ecosystem?
Yeah, I think one major difference between, let's say, Marktplaats versus FMCG or CPG companies in general I work for I think it's definitely around the route to market. Marktplaats directly connects millions of buyers and sellers in the Netherlands, but really bypassing the kind of conventional method of negotiating with a retailer or a reseller to get the products on the market. But it's a trend which is not, the luxury of e-players or e-commerce companies anymore. I think that it's great to see actually how many FMCG companies right now are, first of all, are not standing still at all. And more importantly, how the COVID crisis actually has really accelerated a shift in shopping behavior. And therefore, with many more consumers now heading online for groceries, I think that, whether it's brands like Heineken or L'Oreal or the Unilever of this world, I think there is definitely massive, level of seriousness that these companies are going through in order to basically unlock these challenges. I think the second difference is probably around the ability for a brand like Marktplaats to leverage low to high consumer intent signals through first-party data as well. I was with FMCG, colleagues of mine who were saying, you're so lucky to have access, to such a level of first-party data. As consumers, leave a data trail through their interactions. Data is really becoming the kind of new oil for marketeers right now. Unfortunately, in its raw form, data is really useless in reality, and it must be refined. So what you do with it, and more importantly, so what operating model that makes the difference. And to that extent, I think companies like Booking, Marktplaats, but also others like Netflix, Uber, etc. When you start in-housing disciplines like analytics or addressable media disciplines in general, such as search, remarketing, app adoptions, or any programmatically bought channels, this is what makes the difference as well. Having greater control of your destiny and being able to bring the kind of data curiosity to life in order to answer the why in a data-driven fashion is, I think, something where probably companies like Marktplaats or Booking are more advanced. But this is not proprietary. Many companies are also moving into that sphere.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely accelerating, and particularly this year. So if you were to give like 2 or 3 tips to young marketers who are listening or watching this the podcast, what are the things that you would give them as a piece of advice on how to structure their career in the best way possible?
Yeah. I'd say, there's a huge importance of investing time and energy in general in capability building. I think it's a never-ending journey. I'm a big believer in the power of capabilities, and Heineken to me has been an amazing marketing school for this. There was a department I remember which was empowered actually, which was really empowering a kind of learning marketing organization by developing, embedding very compelling training tools, capabilities, and therefore bringing massive thought leadership across all the must-win battles of Heineken's brand building framework. Extremely successful, massive opportunity to create a cohesive, consistent language because new marketeers entering a new organization tend to basically bring their legacy with them and saying that this is the one that works better than others. So I'd say investing in capability building is key. I think second is very much around staying alert of both, the micro as well as the kind of macro forces that marketeers need to prepare for. I think I was telling you a little bit about, the data as being the new oil. I think in the new decade, data or AI, MarTech are everything. In the next 5 to 10 years, this is going to be the kind of new normal, but everyone will be doing it, right? So, and they would have access to much the same level of data and technology. So understanding the why behind the data and being able to go, beyond the data-driven conclusions by really applying, the kind of uniquely human skills of connecting, showing really true curiosity and applying some, complex thinking I think is going to become more important. And the last point that I want to mention, I think, is really about being brave to also leverage the power of purpose. I think, purpose is obviously, a word that is being used and abused sometimes, I feel. But, brands are increasingly expected to deliver on purpose today. So this notion of really communicating to consumers why actually they exist in the world. Yeah. The reality is that this is often a kind of long-term strategy that doesn't always meet the kind of short-term ROI objectives. You go to a CEO and you say, hey, we need to become more purpose-led in our approaches. Yeah, right. It's interesting, but, we do have quarterly results to hit. Yeah. The dilemma, however, is that, consumers, they want the products and service they use to be more authentic, inclusive, and sustainable. So there is a role that marketeers need to do. And, it's funny because I was reading a study from, I think it was the Edelman Trust Barometer recently, showing brands and NGOs, they have far greater expectations from consumers in general versus government, public entities in general. So the brands play a massive role there as well. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
The advice I would give you.
Yeah, awesome. So last quick question around you and your background. What are the things that you love to do when you're not working?
So, I think in normal circumstances, let's imagine a COVID-free world. I really enjoy traveling a lot, hanging around in cities and going to exhibitions is something I really love. Right now, I think I spend more time race biking than ever. I live in a beautiful city. I live in Haarlem, and it's nearby the dunes. So I go for walks sometimes in the nature and doing new stuff at home. So just trying new recipes for my kids. So looking at today's lockdown, I think this is going to become an even more common habit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing. I would love to continue with a couple of rapid fire questions. Sure. So we're going to head off with the first one. What is the first project you bought on Marktplaats?
The first product. I can't remember the first one. However, I think the last one, I can tell you, it was a Danish vintage dressoir that I bought from a nice business in Groningen, actually in the Netherlands.
All right. That sounds like a nice piece to buy. Cool. What is your favorite social media channel?
I used to go very frequently to China before, and WeChat, I think, is really my favorite one.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, it has everything in it, right? So you're set.
It's in English, so it's very easy.
Yeah, true. What is your favorite marketing channel to use in your work?
Call me a little bit old school, but I find cracking out of home as a media channel requires a lot of creative discipline. So even if I've been in a very data-driven, background before, this is a channel that I love.
Yeah. Well, actually, a great example I recently picked up is from Patagonia. You talked about purpose-led companies. Well, Patagonia really hits the mark there. And they created this very simple copywriting ad, which I think was stuck on a pole or something. And basically, if you read the whole story, it was a very negative story around, oh, we're doomed, we're not going to be able to get together. But then if you read it backwards, it actually was a very positive story. I thought it was excellent, copywriting. It was no design whatsoever. It was very sparsely done, but just the cleverness of the message and the fact that you can still turn things around if you look at it from another perspective was so powerful. And then seeing it in front of you when you kind of are not expecting it was so powerful as well. So good one to check out for the listeners, the Patagonia. So what is your favorite marketing tool? And the reason why I'm asking, there is you mentioned MarTech earlier on. There are over 7,000 MarTech tools, so there's a deluge of options. What is the tool that you enjoy using the most?
Ooh, I use quite a lot, but I'll tell you one which is, I think, quite contextual right now. We're working all from home these days, and I don't know how you pronounce it. Is it Miro or Miro?
Yeah,
probably Miro.
I use both. Yeah,
but it's not cool. It proves to be amazingly practical. It's a real online collaborative whiteboarding platform with digital sticky notes and being able to manage pretty agile workflows. So we had a big project recently where we've been on this all the time.
Ah, nice. Yeah, great tip. And definitely one that keeps popping up more and more and more. So last question on the rapid fire. What is the best content or maybe best ad campaign that you've seen in last couple of months?
So I come from Sony. There's one which I saw recently, which I really was the work coming from the UK and PlayStation 5 for the launch of PS5. Yeah. Where ahead of the PlayStation 5 launch a few weeks ago, I think the signage.
No worries.
Signage at a kind of number of London tube stations, which was remodeled with iconic PlayStation shapes. So big agreement with the Metro network in London. It was super cleverly done. You should have a look.
Yes, I will. That sounds like an awesome campaign. Cool. Let's switch a little bit to talk about Marktplaats. So what is the importance of marketing within Marktplaats?
Well, marketing is really, in an organization like Marktplaats, really tasked to drive a penetration and agenda, but also ultimately business growth. But in a real data-driven, very audience-centric fashion. And we're measuring this really and optimizing towards real ROI goals. So, it doesn't mean that softer metrics are not important, but clearly, ROI is quite important when we think about, how hard are we basically making an impact. Equally so, our consumer acquisition and retention agenda, I think, is becoming more and more personal, really informed by data, powered by also lots of new tech that we are trying to migrate within the organization, and obviously delivered through, more content relevancy. And there is massive commitment from the management to actually further equip and grow actually the team in achieving this. So the belief towards a more data-driven mindset is something which is really starting to resonate quite nicely within the organization, and that's why it's so important right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the company has been, operating for 20 years plus, and it's really been a pioneer in the second-hand peer-to-peer selling. But as time evolved and when success grows, obviously you're going to get competition. So particularly in tech, in fashion as well. In the Netherlands, I think Katowice just raised a significant round recently. So how do you kind of stay abreast of that? How do you keep, your pole position?
Yeah. So I was mentioning to you, audience centricity is quite important for us, obviously. So we're working really, really hard to fully know our users and activate more sophisticated operating model to start really leveraging individual user profiles in real time. And we do this in different ways. I think one is by having a pretty clear and really actionable user segmentation, which is based on behavioral insights. So not too much like aspirational personas that which attributes cannot be, fine in a UI when you want to target real people, for instance.
Yep.
Second is very much around, having almost real-time, identification of the key drivers of change from one segment to another. Somebody who comes for the first time, how do you make this person become, more sticky, and ensuring that if we've got signals that this person eventually is going to churn in 15 days, 3 weeks, or whatsoever. So what is it that you put in place to avoid this to happen? And for us, it's very much around activating users against, therefore, a set of desired action on our platform. We do this, via multiple touch points, combination actually of own media through, emails, silent badges, notifications, etc., but also on-site messaging, for example, like tooltips.
Yeah.
And paid media, and I'm sure that we will be talking a little bit about this in the future.
Yep.
I think from an innovation point of view, you were quoting competition. We stay quite abreast of what's happening in our frame of reference, direct actually. And from an innovation point of view, I think our user behavior is changing, drastically, from 10 years ago, web to app, and more recently during COVID, when people are showing tremendous growth in activity on our platform. I'm sure we're not the only one. And innovation should be really, able to facilitate, really harness all these new opportunities for us. So, customer expectations are changing very rapidly based on their experiences with other e-commerce platforms or social platforms, particularly. Thinking about, fast delivery, abundance of choice or free return, all these different things. So we therefore have to innovate continuously to match these expectations and ultimately the underlying needs of our consumers.
Yeah, makes sense. And what I find interesting though is if I go to Marktplaats, the user interface hasn't really changed significantly. At least that's how it comes across. I don't go there very often. I have to, in full disclosure. But the user interface seems to stay relatively, stable, the same. Whereas if we are in a world where UX UI is a very big, role inside the whole customer journey. So what is the rationale behind that?
So I would challenge you on that, Louise.
Okay.
The first thing I think, although, some may think, including yourself actually, that the user experience stayed pretty much the same for the last few years. In reality, I think it's changed drastically.
This podcast is powered by HelloMasters, Marketing as a Service. I'm Louise Doorn, the host of HelloMasters and founder of HelloMasters. I worked for over 50 years as a marketing executive all around the world. And when I started, marketing was easier with just a few channels. Now, with over 50 options that change all the time, it's a big puzzle. How do you get access to the latest and greatest skills to manage your channels? That's why I started HelloMasters, to make marketing operations easier, smarter, and more cost-efficient. We bring structure in your marketing jungle. With HelloMasters, you can create a flexible layer of marketing experts, or buy one of the 30 marketing packages where you know what you're going to get for a fixed price. For instance, segmentation, content strategy, lead generation, Facebook ads, podcast, A/B testing, or customer journey, to name a few. On our platform, you have direct access to our community of carefully selected marketing experts you can trust. Our handy planning tools are free to use. HelloMasters works for corporates, SMBs, and startups, from B2B to B2C. Let's smarten up your marketing. Go to hellomasters.com.
So I've been on Marktplaats for 10 years actually, and what I see is that we've added, even before I joined actually, a wide variety of new features on the platform that not only drastically shorten the journey to connect really buyers to sellers, but also change massively the role the role that Marktplaats plays in the entire customer journey. So think about, adding the chat function, for example, or, with buyer to seller payments opportunities, integrated shipping, for example. Think about enabling customers to place an ad on Marktplaats in less than 10 seconds today using image recognition or barcode scanners, to name a few. So, we drove actually massive changes on the platform by really adding, a new breed of talents, data scientists, data engineers to our teams, which, are using only algorithmic models, basically machine learning, to transform, from the Marktplaats that potentially you knew before and was a kind of one-size-fits-all user experience to a platform that is actually today highly personalized and relevant to each individual customer. And indeed, to your point, sometimes I get the message from people and saying, this color, it looks old school or old fashioned. And indeed, we don't change the interface or the color all the time. I was mentioning in the introduction that, Marktplaats is a kind of household brand, belongs to the people almost. Our customers have a strong connection to the brand. They consider it almost like their platform. Mm-hmm. And we're very much aware of that, of the role that we play in our lives. We involve our users constantly in kind of every big improvement that we're making on the platform. And we change the interface only if it helps them to become more successful, be it a seller or a buyer. Yeah. And 10 years ago, everything was desktop. And look at where we are now as a platform. We're on 80% of Dutch mobile phones as an app. 85% are logged in on the app. People are receiving notifications, personal feeds, etc. And it's a kind of unprecedented change in reality where, the team can be so proud of being the largest app site in NL, after only having, Google or Facebook properties.
Yes, that's impressive.
Quite a lot has happened.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I think you articulate really, succinct. Is that, you look at kind of the interface, whereas what you're saying, there's a lot of features, a lot of like elements that were added over time, but it might be masked behind the interface if you just look at it from a first glance. Whereas there is a whole journey that is so much more sophisticated and personalized. So that's interesting. So talk a little bit about your role and your team. So you're heading up marketing, but it can be, a pretty broad role, or it can be a little bit more narrow. So please share a little bit about your scope.
I lead a team of, great talents. They're all based in Amsterdam. When I joined actually in May, I decided to centralize everything in Amsterdam.
Okay.
To be split between two countries. And the team is really tasked to drive our efforts for both NL and Belgium across our brand portfolio, so Marktplaats, Tweedehands, and Deuxième Main, which operates in the south of Belgium. Responsibilities are split between various departments. I'll tell you a little bit about it, but a clear commitment to deliver marketing plans that are fit to local context. So, culture, language, behavioral differences, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach from Amsterdam, rolled out in Belgium, for example, vice versa. So various teams, an integrated marketing team, which is a team of, very solid people who are responsible for defining marketing strategies for NL and Belgium and leading the development execution of integrated marketing plans that really drive business growth. And they're split between auto or a flywheel categories or a small medium businesses, for example. Yeah. Then there is a brand and content marketing team, really responsible for brand standards first. So brand positioning, think about brand positioning and identity. So, differentiation, distinctiveness, and they almost act as a brand custodian within the organization, and also responsible for our content strategy for all our always on or more ad hoc based campaigns in both markets. Then there's a third department, which is what I call precision marketing. So it's really a team which is responsible for leveraging real-time customer profiles and intent signals via matching paid, owned strategies and activations. All of them optimized towards ROI goals, even incremental ROI goals when we have A/B experimental designs in place. We can talk a little bit about this later on. And it's split between basically a performance marketing bucket, a CRM bucket. And then analytics is the fourth one, which is really enabling actually our precisions team to make, fast-paced data-driven decisions, providing actionable insights, but also contributing to optimizing our campaigns. And then the last one is PR.
Yeah. Okay. So how big is your entire team?
It's around 20 people.
Okay. Nice.
And I'm recruiting as well, new people. So I'm constantly, the team is also publishing few roles right now. There are some interesting roles in the team. So,
okay, good to know.
Feel free to apply.
Yeah, great. So was your first 100 days in a new role, particularly in a leadership role, are very important. So can you tell what you've done in order to set up your first 100 days for success?
Sure. So one of the things I focus on, to answer your question, I put a lot of attention in understanding also the current capability levels within the team, and started to really objectively, I hope, pinpoint areas of attention and possible capability needs within the organization, and starting to name the possible changes within the team. So, deciding what you want to do is actually just as important as what you will eventually.
For sure.
We worked very much with the team to define, which change in marketing behavior would make the biggest difference in delivering our business goals. Naming the change is always easy, and saying we should do this, we should do that, or we should behave that way. But making it stick is more difficult. And to make it stick, this is where, training yourself, applying consistent way of working, using similar tools, language. We're now embedding this after deployment in, I think, mid-July. We deployed the new organization blueprint, and it's going strong. It's very exciting.
Yeah, cool. So let's talk a little bit about marketing, as a competence within Marktplaats, because it's such an iconic brand. So is there a reason, to continue to evolve the brand? And if you do so, like, how do you go about it? Because as you mentioned earlier, it's a highly recognizable brand. People feel that it's working for them. So how do you, and you talked a little bit about, the role of purpose inside your organization. So do you kind of have a framework in which you operate to evolve the brand? And if so, are there certain kind of parameters that you use in order to decide how to evolve?
Sure. So we're actually just finalizing, and it's a little bit confidential, but in the same time, we will be translating into reality very soon. But we're just finalizing a very intense exercise around our brand positioning across our portfolio, which, also actually includes an overarching brand purpose. I was saying to you that, purpose is really, why we exist as a brand. It's, this kind of positive impact our brands have on people's lives and the world that they live in. So what we've done is that we kicked off, I think it was around end of August, a major project, and we kicked off this journey at the end of September with a cross-functional team with representatives of multiple departments within the company. Think about products, customer relations, people from our commercial team, marketing, etc. And our ambition is really to develop a purposeful positioning framework that is really compelling, relevant to consumers, entrepreneurs, SMBs. So what we've done is, we've conducted internal, external research, analysis to understand Marktplaats' roots, heritage, and the possible opportunity spaces for our brand positioning. I think we've collected something like 500 stories from consumers, small, medium businesses, employees as well, to deeply understand online shopping behaviors and all the motivations attached to it, the role that secondhand, plays in their lives, the role of online marketplaces in general, not only Marktplaats, but competitive ones as well, and the current brand perceptions. And these stories, together actually with all the desk and trend research that we've conducted, have been translated into opportunity spaces for us, and territories that we can as a brand credibly own and use as a foundation to further develop our brand positioning. So I can't tell you much more right now, but
sounds exciting.
We just finalized testing actually even with consumers. I mean, brand positioning has always to be consumer inspired and brand inspired. If you're just translating this into what consumers tell you what they want, then you would probably generate content which is extremely short-term oriented and doesn't have the ability to elevate itself and, leverage the trends that we will be witnessing in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So that's why also being brand inspired is something which is extremely important for us.
Cool. Well, I'm very excited, but it sounds, like a really interesting topic, but such a rich field to work in, because today, today or basically this year, there's been so much change societal that I think has, where Marktplaats can play such an important role to still connect people and continue to be there in a relevant way. So it's very exciting. So the last topic I would love to touch base on is basically your team. So you explained a little bit the competences in your team of 20 people and still growing and hiring. So how can you kind of, build a culture that allows for experimentation, yet at the same time, you also have goals that you meet. So there's sometimes the challenge, the friction that you get in a role as a chief marketing officer, as a marketing lead. So what are kind of your tips and tricks on, or maybe just your foundational way of your management style on how to make sure that you can put those two things in the right balance and relate that to your team in the right way?
Yeah, so to build a culture that allows for experimentation, I think first of all, it needs to be a decision internally that want experimentation to come to life. And I think if you're taking this decision, then you need to have almost a framework that gives permission for people to operate in that framework. So yes. I remember back in the days when I was at Heineken, actually, and I'm reusing good recipes when they work. We implemented an innovation framework, which we call now New Next, which enabled us actually to, split our investment very effectively between, channels or content strategies that we knew how to optimize very, very well. We had good learning, we had good understanding, and, learnings in the now was fairly limited in terms of incremental learnings. However, New and Next were very different. New were more fairly nascent channels, but where we witnessed that some of our competitors, for example, were starting to, generating some, substantial results out of it, while we, whether it was at Heineken or at Marktplaats today, we were a little bit behind. So these are the kind of channels that you see already existing in the marketplace, where you feel that you're behind. It's time to invest behind it. While Next is more, these kind of channels that nobody's really using, is more like, trends that we hear in the marketplace. But if you take a decision to invest behind it straight away, you can eventually create a first mover advantage and start scaling quicker to become a new, and in the future, a now. So having a framework is quite essential. I think the culture of experimentation is very, very big in companies like Booking or Marktplaats or Tweedehand.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So if you kind of look at how you can operate a marketing functions, there are, there's also evolutions there, or maybe even now through COVID revolutions. So I think when we both started our career, there was, a very distinct, you can kind of go into a marketing career inside a larger organization, like how you started, or you kind of go into an agency world, and they coexisted together, and they had finite rules and rules of engagement. And kind of when digital marketing came up, that started to change because there was a lot more skill set and variety of skill sets needed. And they tended to be a lot more specialist agencies, so outside of the bigger network that came up, and they had a really succinct focus. So either it's email marketing or social media, or you name it, can be very specific. And then also at the same time, freelancing, particularly in the Netherlands, came up. Quite a lot. Sometimes in larger organizations, 20 to 30% of their in-house team, was comprised of freelancers, sometimes for even, years on end. And now you see over the last couple of years, a big trend to in-housing, so that you build your entire capabilities in-house. And you try to be very agile and have the culture of experimentation with only people in your own team, and you limit the amount of exposure or work being outsourced to agencies. So there's a lot of things going on, and particularly now with COVID, you do see that there is, also a need for cost reductions and having leaner teams that can do a lot more with limited resources. A long introduction, but what's kind of, in your 20 years of experience, you've probably seen and worked in a variety of these different constructs. Kind of being in your position right now, what do you think is the the best way moving forward for your in-house team? And then I'm also kind of curious to see your feedback on what you see what is the future of the agency model, because right now there is a lot happening there. So I'd love to answer those, get your answers on those two questions.
Okay, so I have to be careful what I say, but so the past almost 4 years when I was at Booking, actually we moved from a model which was extremely agency dependent in the media space towards operationalizing and in-housing the overall programmatic media with a dedicated team that we've recruited, trained from scratch. So
big change.
Big change. So, and it's not something that we did in 2 months. It's a 16-month journey at least, whereby at the end you have think about a programmatic operations team responsible for campaign setup, trafficking, tracking, troubleshooting, optimization. A team who has full responsibility of the ad server, the DSP, dynamic creative tools, who has all the knowledge and the hard skills to create, deploy, A/B testing campaign structures, feed infrastructures or dynamic banners, complex tasks that normally media agency would own or digital agencies would own completely. We've decided to take this completely in-house. You put, almost like a department culture on its head, because it's a bit of an act of bravery, honestly, because, from a cultural point of view, you're looking at, bringing agility to life, recruiting people who have a real appetite for risk. You need as a leader to have a certain level of tolerance for failure, because, you cannot finger point at the agency anymore and say, what have you done wrong? It's your fault. You look at your own team when you're doing this. Internal cross-organizational alignment is something which is the kind of new normal. So therefore, you need to have a massive progressive outlook to do that. And I can tell you, 2 times it was scary like hell. I remember we were looking at each other thinking, what are we embarked into? The media agency was looking at us thinking, good luck with it. At the end, we cracked it. But does it mean that we got rid of the media agency? Not at all. I think, I recently talked to a few CEOs here in Benelux as well as media agencies. And I think the model, especially for pure players or e-commerce companies who basically want to have this greater control of data that I was mentioning to you and reducing the ability to share it, I think the role of the agency still exists massively. When you start insourcing, ultimately the biggest risk that you face is to become inward looking, is that, you look around yourself, what you do, what you operate on. There is still a big need to be outward looking. And this is where the agency comes in. Think about how you trade inventory. Think about, how you meet new partners, new publishers. Not easy, when you're on your own to do the operation, and at the same time, the heavy lifting and meeting new partners, Pinterest, Snapchat, etc. Not the usual suspects that you have as part of your, scaled approach. Think about also, thought leadership purely. What are the key trends that are shaping the future of the addressable space, for instance? Extremely important to stay abreast of these trends, and the media agency is so well positioned with, strong brains to bring you this intel. And also collaborating. So there are areas where, yes, you can do things internally, very much on the operation front. The strategic component, is extremely important. Connections planning is still a discipline where identifying these moments where you can distinctively engage, where people will be, uniquely receptive to your message. You don't recruit planners, strategic planners in-house. You rely also on the agency to potentially drive these responsibilities. So you need to strike the right balance between more the strategic planning, thought leadership type of responsibility versus the operational component. People say you in-house because it's cost efficient. I'd be very careful with that statement, because at the end of the day, recruiting talents today comes at a price as well. If you want to have, very, very strong, a combination of soft and hard skills today these are rare birds in the industry. So if you're, picky on the type of people that you want to bring in, and we are, then ultimately, there's market scarcity in finding these talents. So that's.
And what about the trend of, a lot of people are freelancing for many, many reasons. You want to have more agency on where and how to work, and they want to work for companies that they feel they have a brand connection. And if you work at an agency, you don't always have that freedom to decide, for whom to work. So you see almost like a third, bucket of people, like either in-house, work with an agency, or just work freelance. And they have often very deep, skills, specialist skills. They're very passionate about that. So how do you see that as a third bucket into this equation?
I'm a big fan of freelancers. I've worked with a lot of them in the past. They bring unique skills, unique experiences. I always, encourage people to jump from one job to another every 3-4 years. Never stand still in your role. And freelancers are doing this. They jump from a year project, 6 months project to another one. Sometimes they stay longer. But what I witness a lot with freelancers, and I have a few in my team, is that they love what they're doing, but they also want to get the energy from new ones that basically fuel new skills, both soft and hard, actually, for them. So it's definitely, I've got a big, I'm looking at freelancers always with a very positive eye, because they can bring unique skills to unlock very, very specific challenges.
Well, I really enjoyed our conversation. We've, went through a whole slew of topics across your rich career. I just want to end with one last question, which I always do. What advice would you give the 21-year-old Greg, based upon all the rich experiences that you've had? And then maybe for the, the listeners and the viewers that are a little bit earlier and younger in their career, what advice would you give them?
Be true to your most genuine self would be, In many cases, I think that, when you're a young marketeer starting, your uniqueness is what will still set you apart from the crowd. So you should never, dull your shine for anyone and play a game, just for the sake of it. Be yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a great advice. Well, Greg, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom, experiences, and passion, being a marketing leader. Thank you very much. And I want to wish you all the best with your new brand release coming up. I'll definitely pay attention, and I think the listeners and the viewers should do the same. So continue to check out marktplaats.nl, and we wish you a lovely end of the year and a very good start for 2021. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you. Enjoy the festive season.
All right. Bye-bye.